These my dollars make it hurt.
Welcome back to the Deep Cover Podcast. You know who it is. You know how we do. We're back at you, taking some time off, living life, man. That's what we do. You think we just out here just messing around? We living life. But we are back to talk Ravens and football and just chop it up as we do. Um, so glad to see my guys as usual, Carey and Chris. Before we get into any of the topics or whatever, let me touch base with the guys. Carey, how you doing?
Good, man. Glad to see you guys, man. Glad to get back at it. You know, we got a lot to hit on coming up here, and a lot of excitement, some changes. So I'm ready to get into it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Chris, how about you? How you doing?
I'm doing well, man. Glad to be back chopping it up with you guys. Get a little bit of normalcy when it comes to this Ravens talk instead of that loony bin talk. So I'm ready to get into it.
Oh, I thought we were talking about the. Oh, we not going to trade. Okay, never mind. Never mind. We won't go there. Y'all know how we do. We ain't going there. Enough of that stuff is out there in other places. And if that's your thing, that's what you into, then that's out there. And if you into some different things, we got you. So one of those things is the hiring of Mike Macdonald as the Ravens defensive coordinator, just announced last night after Denard and I recorded an hour-long Fire Zone show episode on Kansas. That was cool. But a guy who had in the earlier part of this week, I think, reports kind of surfaced that he was the guy they were targeting. So we knew that there was a group of candidates, and then it kind of looked like they really had narrowed in on him. And I think people were kind of thinking, hey, would he leave Michigan after 1 year? Obviously, the NFL is a huge draw for any coach coming from college, but he had been here, had been with the Ravens for a long time, going back to like 2014, has a relationship with Harbs and everybody. So, kind of all made sense, fit together, like a puzzle piece. But it was made official last night. So just get both of your guys, kind of initial thoughts and reaction to the news. Chris, I'll start with you. What'd you think about it?
I mean, the writing was kind of on the wall for a little while. You kind of got the sense that he would be one of those top guys because he was interviewed for the job right when Wink was hired. He was one of the guys that came in for an interview, and I think he was like 12 years old at that time. I don't know how old he was, but that might have been in like 2018 or something like that where he got interviewed. So it's kind of difficult to justify giving a guy that's so young that opportunity. So I guess he goes down to Michigan, does well there, and it's like, all right, he got a little bit of seasoning to him, and he's a guy that we really like, a guy that he's familiar with our personnel, he's familiar with our scheme, and how we like to do things over here, and it's kind of it's a little bit of a breath of fresh air, uh, because it's not the same old guy, it's not someone that we've seen before at another place, and now he's back over here. He's a young guy, 34 years old. So he's bringing in some fresh flavor, hopefully, to this defense. And there were other guys that were interesting. We got Joe Witt, Chris Richards, Anthony Weaver. It would have been exciting to see those guys too, especially the Chris Richards. That's how you pronounce his name, right? Chris Richards?
I think it's Richard.
Richard? Okay.
I think it's Richard, yeah, or unless I'm just making it sound like fancy. It's always a
Well,
possibility.
we're gonna call him Chris, just to cover our tracks.
Okay.
So yeah, because when I saw them, they were gonna interview him. I was like, damn, I want to start watching some Seattle stuff, some Legion of Boom stuff, because I thought we were gonna transition to that, and that was kind of exciting too. But I mean, you watch the Michigan defense, which is something I've been doing, scouting certain players. I scouted Daxton Hill earlier in the year. I scouted David Ojabo a little bit. So you see them do some interesting things, and and it's not going to be Wink's defense. I see it thrown around a lot where it's like, oh, there's just Wink Jr. They got mini Wink, and it's like, no, he's not like Wink from what he called in Michigan. And I know college is completely different than the pros. Obviously, we all know that. But from what we saw is he's not gonna call all of those exotic blitzes, you know, all the time, and he's not going to be doing that kind of stuff. He looks like the guy that he wants to play it close to the vest, and he doesn't really want to take those chances. So, I'm excited to see it. I feel like anytime you have a new coordinator, it's exciting because it's something new. It's something hopefully fresh. So yeah, I'm excited to see it. And like I said, he's a young guy, so we've never really had this in Baltimore before, where we have such a young coordinator. So I'm excited to see how this goes for them too.
Yeah, the young coordinator thing, man, it really hits you when you're my age, just kind of how old you are. I'm 12 years older than that dude. So it really kind of hits you when it's one thing like when it's players, right? I think we all kind of have that moment once you get a little bit older where there's maybe a guy who you watched when you were young and coming up, and now you see they got like a kid playing in college or something like that. But when there's coaches younger than you, it really makes you feel, like you've been around for a minute. But I'm excited about that too. Like you said, I think anytime there's change um, in the coaching staff, I mean, it's the same thing with players, right? Whenever new players come onto the team, there's a sense of excitement. There's a sense of excitement when coaches come on too. I guess there could be times where certain coaches come and people are like, oh God, not this.
Yeah,
But,
like Urban Meyer.
yeah, yeah, yeah. They're kicking your kickers and stuff. Good riddance to that dude. But anyway, let me get your thoughts, Carey. What'd you think about the announcement?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that Chris hit on a couple of guys, Chris Richard and Joe Witt. And I was just like him, like excited about those guys once I heard them as potential candidates. So I wouldn't say disappointed when Macdonald got the job, but you thought initially, maybe this is kind of more status quo. But just following some of the Michigan people and how they spoke about how he liked to adapt week in and week out, to his opponent, and obviously the work you guys did with the fire zone, kind of breaking down some of the things you saw from his defense. It got me excited because this is a young guy that he's going to ascend as a coach. He's going to get better as a coach, but he already has some of those key qualities you look for as far as being able to adapt to different situations. So excited to have somebody in the fold that will adjust to what's going on around him and adjust to the changes that are happening with the passing game. So all in all, excited, man, for what he could potentially bring to the table. Um, it'll be interesting to see the shift because for as long as we've watched the Ravens, you have to go back to like Marvin Lewis days to not look at this Ravens team and think of a defense that's just exotic, attacking. And now we potentially might see something different from this team. So it's going to be interesting to see how it's received by the fan base, and how it kind of flows on Sundays.
It will be interesting. It certainly helped to have David Ajabo and Aiden Hutchinson in terms of not needing to create a lot of additional pressure when you got those two guys coming off the edge. But I do agree with both of you guys that I think that is sort of baked into his philosophy. Not that he won't bring pressure, but he didn't appear to be from the games that I've watched, and I shared before we started recording with you guys a little bit of charting that I've just started to doing. So I won't draw too many conclusions because I'm real early in it. But just early indications are that that's kind of his philosophy. Is he's a guy who's going to kind of line up and and be sound, be kind of really sound in their structures and in their assignments, and how guys kind of relate to one another and play off one another. Something Denard and I talk about all the time with like the Buffalo Bills defense or the Colts defense, right? Where you see, not that they don't have, good players, but they really play together. You can tell that it's a very sound, cohesive defense, and you don't tend to see a lot of guys kind of jumping outside of what they're supposed to be doing and trying to do more than they should, or being put in positions where they're really in a bind, because there's a lot of, we talked about last night, there's a lot of if then kind of things in Wink's defense and some of these other defense, and that can be a lot to process, particularly for young guys. If it's one thing, okay, maybe that's not that bad. If A happens, then do B. But if A happens, do B. If B happens, do C. If D happens, do E, and so on and so forth, and all on one play, all in one call. And you're like, that's a lot to process for anybody. And like I say, particularly if you got young guys, and particularly if you got guys coming in on a Tuesday who got to play on Sunday, and you're trying to throw them into that, that's asking a lot. So I think Macdonald's cut from a little bit of a different cloth in that regards. Like you said, Chris, I know people see the background and the ties and they think, oh, why would he be any different? But look, just because he was on the staff and coaching underneath those guys doesn't mean he didn't have his own thoughts and ideas about how to call defense. He was a position coach, and he was, coaching those positions in the way that, he thought was best and would help the players. But obviously he was working under DC, and you've got to work within their structure, within their defense. But that doesn't mean, like any of us who are on a job and working for somebody, and you're like, all right, yeah, I got to do it this way because this is what they want. But shit, I would do it like this, or I might do it like that. I mean, I think everybody does, and then that's what you want from, talented people, from up and coming people in your organization. Hey, we brought you here for your opinion, for your ideas, not just to be a robot and do what you're told, right? At least in good organizations. That's my opinion. You want those people to learn the fundamentals and learn the basics of your system, your core philosophy, but then express their own ideas and put their own stamp on things. So I think people just need to keep an open mind about that. And look, if we get to the season, week 1, and you're like, this is the same thing. Again, continue to keep an open mind. It's the first game. And look, I've already told myself kind of mentally, it's the first season in a new defense, and his first season calling plays in the NFL. I mean, yeah, he called them last year in college, but that was his first year calling defense in college. So I've already prepared myself mentally for transition. Not that that means they're going to struggle or whatever. They could ball out, and I hope they do. But I think I've said to myself, I'm going to be prepared for a little bit of transition, a little bit of up and down at some points in the season, because I think that's just natural. But hey, happy to have him. Like I said, excited that he's on staff, and we'll see. It seemed like a lot of the players, you saw that on Twitter. You saw a lot of guys kind of saying welcome back, and let's get to work and stuff like that. So you remember these guys really just worked with him like 2 years ago. Patrick Queen and Tyus Bowser and guys like that. They just worked with him not that long. And so they have that relationship. So I think that's a good thing as well.
Yeah, that's a leg up for him and for the team, because it's like this guy already knows our personnel and he's worked with them closely. So it that kind of you won't have that learning curve of, all right, I got to get to know this player, I got to get to know that player, I got to see what this guy could do, I got to see what that guy could do. He, other than the rookies and the new guys that are on the team, he knows this defensive roster. So he already knows what guys can do and how they can be used. So that's a huge leg up for the new defensive coordinator coming in.
Absolutely. Like you said, it kind of speeds up that learning curve, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to necessarily take as long to evaluate guys and figure out, okay, well, what are they good at? What are they not good at? You already have a really good feel for that. So that's cool that he has that advantage coming in. Let me ask you guys this. Let me ask you both this question. There's nothing out there, so I'm not basing this on anything that has been reported I heard, but just curious. My mind wheels are always turning. What do you think about the position coaches on that side of the ball or on offense, if you want to take it there too? Um, do you, and I'll start with you on this one, Carey, first. Do you expect or anticipate that there could be more change at the position coach level on either side of the ball?
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. You got the two guys in house that interview for this DC position, Anthony Weaver and Chris Hewitt, and those guys might be slighted, and as the coaching cycle turns itself over, they might find opportunities elsewhere that they might feel may give them a little bit better of a chance to advance, because we just said it. This defensive coordinator is 34 years old. It's not like he's 70 years old on his way out, and these guys could be lining up to be that next guy. If things go well with this guy, he's going to be there for a while until he becomes a head coaching candidate. So a guy like Weaver, if they feel like they're on that fast track, they may opt for, a different, scenery that might, allow them to advance a little bit quicker. So you always have to factor that in. I would think from a merit standpoint, the way this run defense played, especially later in the year with all the injuries, with Weaver coordinating that facet of the defense, I would think that would make him safe from a performance standpoint. Hewitt maybe not as much because of the struggles with the secondary. I mean, a lot of it was injuries, but too, when you look at it, there was a lot of blown coverages, missed tackles, things of that nature on the back end. And at the end of the day, Wink or whoever can't go out there and make those plays for them, but somebody has the answer for them at the end of the day. And, you can't fire all the players, but you damn sure can fire a coach, if you feel like, things need to change. So um, I kind of lean towards it being a status quo, like everybody coming back. But, I mean, you just never really know, because you don't know. Obviously, with Wink being gone, you knew there was some kind of frustration there on that side of the ball. Now, we don't know how deep that frustration lies. So it's going to be interesting to see. You got Macdonald in place now, so you have a new voice, a new direction. But if you're moving to kind of a more dramatic philosophical shift, then you may need to get more people in the room that align with that shift. So, it's going to be interesting. I wouldn't rule anything out.
It definitely would be interesting. Chris, what about you? You anticipate any other changes at the position coach level on offense or defense? Or, hey, what the hell? Coordinator position on offense. It's what everybody wants. I'll just open it. Take it wherever you want to take it.
Well, you open it, and I'm gonna close it right back up. No, the only one that I could think of was Rex Ryan. I mean, not Rex Ryan, Rob Ryan, the linebacker coach, and it's under the little caveat of Zachary Orr being a free agent right now, with the whole Jacksonville fiasco going on right now. Right before we got on, we saw Joe Cullen he's getting an interview for the Colts job. So who knows? Maybe he wants to go with Joe Cullen over to Indy. But if not, he and Mike Macdonald work very closely in Baltimore. So maybe Mike Macdonald be like, I want my guy back. I work closely with him. I know him. I don't really know Rob Ryan. Let's get Zachary Orr. And, we know the players loved him too. So I feel like that would be a good marriage if he's willing to come back to Baltimore and not just stay on with Joe Cullen.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. Hey, I'm gonna give you a real quick hypothetical. Okay, so let's say that Cullen does go and get the Colts DC job, and he wants to bring Zach with him there. And he offers him, right? He says, "Hey, you can come over, coach the linebackers over here." But then what if Mike Macdonald says, "Hey, I want you to come coach linebackers for us. You go work come here and work with Patrick Queen and those guys, or you go there and work with the maniac, Darius Leonard and their guys. Tough choice.
It's tough. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe he still has a house in Baltimore. Maybe that sounds a little bit more appealing. Maybe he got kids. Maybe his kids miss it. Who knows? That's when that life comes into play.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a big factor. We've seen that with players when they look at making a move. So I imagine it would be similar for coaches too. They're looking at how it affects family, if they have kids, how it affects schools. Shoot, we've even heard people talk about weather. They ain't trying to be nowhere cold. They're like, look, I'm not built for it. To be somewhere warm. If I have options, I'm gonna choose a warmer weather option. So you can never exclude those life factors because this is your job, and obviously it's a very big part of their lives because of how much time these guys spend, with teams and players at the facility. But you do still have a life and family outside of that job that you have to take into consideration when you make these decisions and choices. So that's an excellent point as always. Did we want to talk any more about coaches right now, or did we want to kind of shift into the little roster scenario game? I won't call it a game, just an exercise, thinking about some different things. Anything else on coaches or?
I wanted to get into like what this means for the personnel and the scheme
Okay.
because they're kind of at a crossroads right now with B. Will, a free agent. We know Calais is a free agent too, and I Jelly's a free agent, and this just goes on the interior guys, and it's like, what direction do they want to go in now? Traditionally we've seen them be, obviously they're hybrid 3-4 defense, but they prefer to have that big guy, right over the center. That's what they prefer to have. Now I wonder, are they going to move away from that under Macdonald? Are they going to be, that 2-4-5 defense? It's an interesting thing to see and an interesting evolution because the game is changing. We see it all the time. We see it every week in, week out. The game is changing, and defenses have to catch up because right now there's no such thing as a dominant defense. The Bills had the number one defense and they got lit up. There's no such thing as the Ravens defense. I think the last great defense that we saw was probably the Broncos when the year they won it. That's probably the last dominant defense that the NFL has seen. And ever since then, there have been good ones, but not dominant. And I wonder if we'll see that change and that evolution come as far as personnel is concerned.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like I said, starting to do a little bit of this charting early on and just IDing some of the players and the body types on guys that he had at Michigan. Kind of some interesting things there. But before I speak on any of that, let me get your thoughts on that, Carey. What do you think about that? About how the roster could be evolving to align, because you talked about that alignment with a new philosophy on defense.
Yeah, it's interesting. And when you think about it, when you look at the makeup of this roster with a lot of guys being unrestricted, if you're going to make that shift, this would be the time to do it. I mean, the cupboard is open for you to go ahead and make that shift now. We just have Matt BK under contract. You got Derek Wolfe under contract, but with his health, you're not sure how things are going to go there. So he's not really a guy that you can kind of put in pen as somebody that you can count on necessarily right now. So you got Matt BK, and then you got a blank canvas to fill in how you want to fill it in. And if you're moving to a system, like Chris is saying, this 4-2-5, if you're moving to a system where you're not exotic necessarily or not blitz heavy, you're timely blitzes, but you're playing man coverage, you're dropping linebackers in zone, you're doing some of these things, and you want to force teams to put together methodical 7, 8, 9, 10 play drives to score on you, then you're going to need the horses up front that can get after it. You know, they can one gap, get up the field, and get to the quarterback. So now is as good a time as any to make that change. And honestly, with the way things are going, I anticipate that being a focus in free agency and more so in the draft. But I think if they can identify some guys in free agency that they can get on modest deals, then we could see some of that in free agency as well. But Chris hit on a good point. I definitely think we're probably going to get ready to see a shift.
Yeah, and I don't know that you'll see, because what was B Will 330, 340, what they list him at. I mean, we don't know what these guys play at throughout the season, but somewhere in that 330, 340 range. But I think what was interesting at looking early on at some of that Michigan defense and doing a little bit of the charting, they had a lot of 4 down looks where you had a Jabo and Aiden Hutchinson as your defensive ends on either side, and then 2 D tackles on the inside. And they had some big bodies in there. Maisie Smith went 6'3", 326. They listed him on the school site. And then who's the other guy? Donovan Jeter, 6'3", 325. So what they would do is they would have some combination of Maisie Smith and maybe a Christopher Hinton. So Hinton would be more like a 3 technique, right? Kind of that more one gap penetrator body type. And then Maisie Smith was kind of more of your double team eater. And then when they needed to rotate, to give guys a break, then they bring in Chris, I was going to say Chris Jenkins, that's defensive end, Donovan Jeter, and then Jess Spate. Jess Spate, 6'5", 310, a little closer to that 3 technique type body type. So they still had these defensive tackle body types. Now, did I have like the big, like I said, a big massive head up, 340, 350 pound guy? No, they didn't have that. But they would play some of those guys head up at times. But most of the time, it was in a 3 technique and like a 2 technique. So like outside shade of a guard and like head up on the other guard, or maybe, a 2-eye, like inside shoulder of the other guard. So they still use those big bodies inside. I just didn't see as much of the 3 down front stuff that you kind of saw in Wink's defense. They played it some, but they would do it in some different ways. So they might bring in 2 of those defensive tackle body types and play them at like double 3 techniques. And they put a guy head up on a center, but it'd be a linebacker like Michael Barrett. They put 23 up there and line him up on the center. And then you still had a Jabo and Hutchinson on the edges. Or you might have, they put this other cat out there sometimes on the edge, which is number 32, Jalen Harrell, 6'4", 242. Sometimes they put him out there on the edge at DN. So they would still get into some of those 3 down looks. So I think that when people, talk about the notion of, is it more of the same? Will it just look like a mini Wink? I think what will be similar is the multiplicity. Now, what they consider, what Macdonald maybe considers his base versus what Wink considered his base is probably different. Like you guys said, I think, Macdonald's probably more of a 4-2-5 kind of guy in terms of a base, but both of them were multiple. And I think that you will continue to see that. You're going to have multiple looks. And, a lot of that is driven by personnel. The other thing we talked about before we started recording was their linebackers and their DBs. All these guys are like 6 foot to 6'2", mid 220 pound range, all of them. And so you get a bunch of guys on the field who can run, who can play, in the box, who can walk out. If you got like a spread type formation, 2x2, 3x1, drop in the zone and play zone a little bit. You got safeties at 220 who obviously can come down and support the run. So it's going to be interesting to see if he mirrors some of that in terms of the kind of personnel he wants to have here. I mean, obviously he's going to work with the guys that are already here and under contract, but in terms of the draft, in terms of free agency, will he maybe look to mirror some of those body types that he had at Michigan? I didn't know until I started writing this stuff down on these guys, how much experience was on that team. A lot of senior and juniors and even some graduate guys in there. They didn't, at least in the rotation that I've seen in this first game, there's like 4 sophomores that they rotated in there. And that was out of a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 man rotation. Everybody else was either a junior, senior, or a graduate student. And I think they were putting graduate students. I think that might be those fifth year guys that, the super senior kind of
Mhm.
guy because of COVID. Um, so I had a lot of experience on that defense. And I was like, man, I didn't realize that they had that there. So that was kind of interesting to see. Now, like I said, I very early on in the charting, as I go through it, maybe that'll change up. Maybe we'll see some different deployment of personnel. But yeah, I don't, when people are like, I don't know if he's going to go to, the 3-4 because they don't want those big body types in there. I wouldn't necessarily say they're not going to go to it, but who makes up those looks may be different than what we've seen in the past.
And it's something before he even got that we were speaking about before he even got hired by the Ravens. I think before the Ravens season even finished, when we were talking about David Ojabo, and something that I really liked, that he gave the freedom to David Ojabo, because he's a young player, and I think it was you, Mike, that shared a story with us with a former player where he was saying that there were certain coaches that were like, no, don't use this pass rush move. Don't do
Yeah.
that. And I think there was a story this year too, with a breakout player, Arden Key. He's having a career year,
Yep.
and they're like, he's like, yeah, they didn't let me loose. They didn't let me do what was comfortable doing, what I like to do. They wanted me to do it their way. And I think we saw Mike Macdonald give that freedom to David Ojabo, who was just, trying out moves in the games. And you could see it in games where he was trying moves out, and you're like, what the hell is he doing? But then you see it later on in the game, and it's like, damn, he perfected it. Like the second or third time that he tried to do it in the game. Now, any other DC will probably be like, hey, cut that shit out. Don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
But for him to have the confidence and the faith, and like, no, keep hitting your move, keep doing what you feel like you need to do. And if it's gonna work, I have the utmost confidence in you for you to keep trying. And that's huge for a DC to give you that kind of freedom to allow you, because this is, we've spoken about this before. It's like art, pass rush,
Mhm.
running routes, getting off the line. That's like an art within itself.
Yep.
So for him to give his pass rusher that freedom to kind of perform his art the way that he wanted to, that speaks volumes. And I think fans should be encouraged by that, where you have somebody like Dafe Owe, or Justin Matabike, these guys that have so much natural ability and so much burst off the line, and it's like, just let them hunt, let them do what they're best at. And I think that's something that we'll see a little bit more of this season.
Yeah, and I think you could see that at times on their tape. Like I said, I'm early into the study, but um, I saw at least one play so far where it was Aiden Hutchinson. I think it was Mike Morris, who's kind of like a defensive end type. He's like 6'6", 278, but they would kick him inside and let him rush inside. So it was Aiden Hutchinson outside of him and Morris inside, and they're both rushing and they're both hitting inside spin moves from the same side of the line at the same time. And I was like, I don't know that I see two guys on the same side both spin inside like that. I was like, these dudes must have some freedom to kind of go out there and get it done however they think they can get it done. So that's pretty cool to see, and it really kind of supports what you were saying. And yeah, we've heard those stories. I mean, I was listening to a Twitter Spaces earlier tonight. It was Antonio Cromartie, who I think coaches at the high school level now, and he had a bunch of other high school coaches and some DB coach, trainer types who
He's
work
not
with
at
high school
A&M.
kids. Oh, you know what? You're right. I think he might be in college.
Yeah,
He might
he's
be.
at A&M.
Okay, yeah, I think you're right about that. I don't know. He talked about wanting to stay at the high school level. I don't know why he's was talking about that. And maybe he was talking about just working with younger kids in general, as opposed to going to the pros. But to that point that you were making, he talked about how, and I think Will Blackman was on there too. He's a guy who played in the league, played corner a long time in the league. About how you can overcoach guys. Now with kids, he said it's a little different because you're trying to instill fundamentals and have them learn the game the right way. But he said even with kids who are pretty experienced. I mean, Cromartie talked about his son, who I forget how old he is now. He said like 14, 13, 14. But he said by the time he was 6 years old, he already knew how to take a read step as a corner. Like he said he would take him to these camps for like 8-year-olds, like these all-star camps. And his son would go up to the coach and say, "Hey, coach, is it cool if I play read step?" And the coach is looking at him like, "What is a read step?" Yeah, you know how to do that. So they were talking about how you want to give these guys all of the tools, right? Don't feel like, oh, I can't show him this or I can't show him that. It's too much. Give them all of the tools. He said you gotta there's got to be a progression to how you do it so you don't overload them and overwhelm them, but you give them all of the tools, and then that allows them to have the freedom to express themselves out on the field. You know, they can pick the right tool for the situation. And he talked about how, you know, kids sometimes who are really talented, who they work with and have really good technique, they'll go to a college and the first thing the coach tries to do is change their technique. And he was like, "Nah, man, get out of here with that." Like, you know, when the kid gets out on the field in practice or even in a game and he's making plays, and they're like, "Look, he ain't gonna mess with you no more about that technique. When he see you get out there and you see you, you know, picking balls off and going to the crib, they're gonna let you do what you need to do out there." So I think sometimes that gets associated with younger coaches too. I don't know if that's always the case. I don't want to say that there's never any older coaches who give guys that kind of freedom, because I think they probably do. But I think that that gets associated more with younger coaches, that, you know, they really are sort of creating that environment where guys can express themselves a little more freely. And you know, it's not so rigid, you know, my way or the highway kind of an
Mhm.
idea. So
Yeah, and
that'll be
I
fun to
think
see. 'Cause like you said, they got some really young, talented guys on this defense, and yeah, let's
yeah,
let those guys loose and see what they can do.
and I something else too, where it's like yeah, he was a good coordinator, but look at the roster that they have, and it's like you could use that on the flip side, and you could look at Penn State and look at all the monsters that they had.
Yeah,
Penn State was not a dominant defense, so you can have the players, but if you don't use them correctly and maximize it to their full potential, it doesn't really mean anything. So the fact that he had the roster and he was able to maximize their full potential and take them to the next level, where you hear Aiden Hutchinson, like, he told me to stand up and I could rush from a 2-point stance, and that made a huge difference. It's like, yeah, that's what the coach is there for. Like, that's something that he improved on when he came to the Michigan team. So that's what you want to see. You want to see guys that are going to come in here and be innovative. Like, hey, let's do this instead of the way we were doing it before. I think this will work better. And when you see the results, like that's what you want from a guy. That's what you want from a defensive coordinator.
yeah. And you when Hutchinson talked about that, he was on Chris Long's podcast. You could tell he didn't want to throw Don Brown, his previous coordinator, under the bus. He just said, I played for another coordinator for 3 years, and he had me rushing inside more. That was it. That's all you needed to say. He didn't have to, get more specific than that. And then he said, Mike Macdonald comes in and he lets me play on the edge a little bit more. And he lets me stand up, and he's like, I can see everything. And he said it just feels so right. And Chris Long, who was a number one pick and edge rusher type, had some good years in the NFL, said, yeah, it does feel right, doesn't it? They both feel so right. You can stand up and you can see everything. Because he said sometimes when you're down in that 3-point, it gets hard to see certain things. But he's like, when I'm standing up, I can see into the backfield. I can see the quarterback. I can see the tackle. I can see backs coming, tight ends, whatever. He said, I can see everything. Um, so yeah, that's what you want, right? In a good coach is you've got these players with different abilities, and you want to put them in positions to maximize what they can do and give them the freedom to kind of express it in different ways. Now, like you said, within the structure of a defense, because I think that's one thing that I've seen in a lot of good defensive coaches is that if you've got a really talented guy like an Aaron Donald, we see this with Aaron Donald, we've seen it with JJ Watt, you put those guys in positions where they can just go out and win however they need to win. And then the rest of the defense is structured around them to say, okay, if you're going to give Aaron Donald a two-way go inside, he can rush inside or he can rush outside over a guard. Somebody, he's going to, so let's say he goes inside, he's going into the A gap. Well, who's got the B gap? Well, somebody else, because of the way the defense is structured, will have that assignment. If you see Aaron go in, you got the B gap now. You got to make Aaron right? Same thing with JJ Watt. If you see JJ go outside and maybe you thought he was going to go inside, well, we've got the defense structured in a way that somebody else can cover that A gap or that B gap while JJ loops outside. So I think good defensive coordinators will do that with really special players, put them in positions where they have options, and then everybody else around the rest of the defense will, kind of have more maybe of a more structured role. And that can vary. It might not always be that guy. It might be a different guy, so that way you keep guys happy too. Because obviously if somebody's always the, make him right guy, that can make you feel some type of way. After
we saw that. We saw that in Baltimore with Ed Reed and DeJuan Landry.
Yeah.
Ed Reed always used to big up DeJuan Landry and used to be like, "That's my guy." Like, if I make a mistake, I know he's there to cover me up, and make, if I take a bad guess, I know he's going to be there to cover that up for me.
Yeah. Heard about Patrick McCarry. We heard Bradley Bozeman say that about McCarry. Say, look, that guy is the smartest guy out there on the O-line. He was like, if I miss a call or if I don't see something, he'll pick it up and he'll call it out. He's like, hey, look over here. Look, this guy's coming. Or hey, look at this. We need to slide this way. So, having those kinds of guys around, guys who maybe have special talent. And so you want to give them a little bit more freedom, having other guys who can say, hey, I got you. If you're going to go, I got you. Don't worry about it. I think that just, is a hallmark of good defenses. So I think there was a little bit of that at Michigan, just from what I'm seeing. Like I said, I don't have any connection, not getting any kind of inside information, just what I'm seeing on tape. And you kind of just feel like, okay, when guys are double inside spin moving on the same side, somebody's got some freedom to do what they want to do. You just don't see that very often. Anything else on the roster and the personnel we want to touch on?
One thing I just thought about, and it kind of comes back to Macdonald. It'll be interesting. We talk about his knowledge of the personnel here. He knows the guys here, because he was just here a year ago. But what'll be interesting is, I'm sure he had an idea of how he would have done things when he was the position coach with certain guys, but he was doing that from a vantage point of never having to actually call the defense. Now he's called the defense for a year. Now to be interested in him coming back and how that perspective changes with how he would use certain guys. And now he has the wherewithal now, the power to implement some of those things. So, he may have had one kind of view on a different player, how he think he would use this guy and that guy. And now that he's done it for a year, he may come back with, even more fresh perspectives on these guys coming back, but he also has the knowledge of their games, so he doesn't have to, just throw somebody completely in the deep end, because he does have that knowledge of the player. So it'll be interesting to see, as everything unfolds, how he uses certain guys, and a lot of tinkering can be done with this personnel.
Experience definitely matters. No question about that. And that is a different kind of experience that you just hit on, going from position coach experience to defensive play caller experience. So I think that's an excellent point. Like you're the position coach, you may see it one way, but now when you've actually been making calls in games and you say, oh, wait a minute, when I did that, here's what the offense did. We need to tweak that. That might have just been hypothetical at the position coach level, but now you've seen it as a play caller. And so you've got that experience that you can call on. And, the other thing, I don't know, NFL guys are very smart, so I don't want to make too much of a big deal about this, especially, offensive coordinators. But you do have a new defense coming in. And so offensive coordinators, and particularly in the division, they have not seen this defense, not this version of it. And so, there's going to be a little bit of a learning curve for them as well as they go into game plan for the Ravens. It's different now. With Wink, they probably had a certain plan and certain things that they expected to see. And with Mike Macdonald, they have to go back to the Michigan tape. That's really all that they have to go on in terms of what kind of things that we think we can expect to see from him. And he probably will certainly do a lot of those things, but he might have some new stuff too that they that they haven't seen yet. So I think that's always tough for offense or defense. Anytime you've got those unscouted looks, where there's just stuff that you have not really seen or had an opportunity to prepare for, you can kind of catch people off guard. Obviously, they catch up fast, in the NFL. So I'm not saying that's like a sustainable kind of thing, but I think it can work to your advantage a little bit early on when people kind of haven't had an opportunity to really get a book on you and kind of see what you do. So I think you can tell by this discussion that it's exciting. Just the whole notion of it is exciting.
Yeah.
Something
Those
new.
OCs can't put in pin cover 0 when it's 3rd and 25 anymore.
Hey, Ed Reed, and I know a lot of people, jumped on some of the comments. They kind of cherry picked some comments he made on a podcast that he was on in an article. I read the article and I actually listened to the whole podcast. Shout out to Morton Anderson. People may remember longtime Saints, the Great Dane podcast. That guy's actually got a pretty good podcast, and he has some good guests on. He had Ed Reed, and I listened to that one, and he had Wade Phillips on, so I went back and listened to that one. I was like, this guy is actually pretty good. I enjoyed it because you think a kicker, I don't know. Nah, this guy is a very knowledgeable guy, very well rounded. But one of the other things that Ed said when he was talking about defense and offense, he said it's true for defensive coordinators and offensive coordinators. When it gets hot, when the pressure's on in the game, it's high leverage situation, all OCs and DCs are going to go to their bread and butter. They're going to go to what they know. And what Wink knew was pressure. When things got hot, pressure was his bread and butter. That's what it was. And I'm not saying that as a negative. That was his go-to, was to bring pressure in some shape, form, or fashion, right? When his back was up against the wall. And obviously that was taken advantage of at times. So it can work the other way. I mean, you could say, well, my go-to is to sit back in zone. And people can take advantage of that. So I'm not saying there's one way that's necessarily right or wrong. I think that made a lot of sense when Ed said, hey, whatever it is, whatever your go-to is, when it's nut cutting time, that's what you're going to. This is human nature. You're going to go to the stuff that you're comfortable with and the stuff that you can hang your hat on. He gave an example of a play call they had back in the day when he was playing with Ray and Suggs and all those guys. He says, first thing we installed day one of camp. And whenever we got in the situation where it was hot, that's the call that we went to. Because and Denard talked about this last night. When everybody knows exactly what they're supposed to do, they say, okay, now I can just play. I don't have to think. I don't have to process. I know this call like the back of my hand against whatever situation they put in front of us because we've worked it so many times. Now we can just play. So I think there's definitely some familiarity and it gives you a sense of confidence when you've been in a certain call and okay, everybody knows what to do in this call. So if we didn't always see that last year, sometimes you see guys are looking around and like, hey, not sure what's going on. And, that's not a situation you want to be in on defense where there's confusion and lack of communication, guys not really understanding what they're supposed to be doing. That's the band's going to be playing. That happens too many times. Band's going to be playing real quick. It's not going to be your band. So look, did we want to dive into this process? I mean, we talked about personnel. I know we talked before the show a little bit about maybe taking a look at the current roster, current guys that are under contract, and just kind of kicking some thoughts around on that. Do we want to do that now, or do we want to put it off for later? I mean, we're pretty early into the offseason. I can go either way. It's up to you guys.
I'll have you make the call, Carey.
Executive decision.
Let's see. Maybe the offense, we can hit on a few guys since it's a lot more free agents and a lot more going on the defensive side of the ball.
Okay.
Maybe we hit on a few guys on the offensive side.
Okay. Well, let me throw
kind of
this
kick
up
it around, see what you think,
so people can see, so we can see, and other people can see, as you guys will see once I get this set up right. I can figure out how to get it set up right. Here we go. I have removed some other information. Hold on, that's not the right one. Boom, there it is. I've removed some other information from a previous version to protect the innocent. And so, full disclosure, I always like to give credit where credit is due. These are the players currently under contract. I want to say there's about 48 guys. and their cap numbers for 2022 in parentheses. This all comes straight from Brian McFarland at Raven Salary Cap on Twitter. You can see his work over at RussellStreetReport.com.
The
Brian is
GOAT.
the best, one of the best
Friend of
out
the
there.
show. Friend of the show.
Friend of the show, that's right.
Yes, sir.
Former guest Brian McFarland. So all credit to him for this information. None of this comes from me. Full disclosure there. And so, as you can see, I probably needed to update this because I've got a blanket fullback. Because again, remember, it just shows the people that are under contract. We know Ricard is a free agent, but they did sign Ben Mason to a reserve futures contract. But I don't think he's in that rule of 51 calculation at this point. So I think that's probably why he's not on here. But I'll kind of just talk through real quick, and then I'll toss it to you guys for your thoughts. Obviously, Lamar Jackson right up there. You see his cap number, $23 million. We know that contract negotiations are ongoing. Whether something gets done or whether he plays under his 5th-year option, remains to be seen. But we know those negotiations are ongoing. What's kind of cool about the running back room, all 3 of those contract for next year. So Gus, JK, Justice Hill, all coming back, which is pretty cool. Surprisingly, Gus, well, not surprisingly, Gus got the biggest cap because he's been around the longest. Plus, he got another deal after his rookie deal. So that's not really that surprising. Wide receiver group, you see all the guys there. It's amazing, right? Just a couple of years ago. Think back to 2019, like what that list looked like and what it looks like now. So Marquise Brown, Rashad Bateman, Miles Boykin, Devin Renee, Tylen Wallace, James Prochet, Jalen Moore, Benjamin Victor. So, looking pretty good there. Of course, the tight end group, we all know Money Man Andrews, Nick Boyle, Josh Oliver, Tony Poljan. Don't sleep. Tony Poljan. Got a chance to get in a couple of games last year. And the O-line will finish up there. Ronnie Stanley, Alejandro Villanueva, Kevin Zeitler, Juwan James, Patrick McCarry just got paid, Ben Powers, Tyree Phillips, Ben Cleveland, Jared Jones-Smith, and Jimmy Murray round out the group there. So start with you on this one, Chris. Just kind of your thoughts about the state of the offense in terms of, guys that are under contract, guys that are free agents, guys maybe you think you want to bring back on offense, or guys that you think, hey, maybe you let them test the market and you look at, drafting somebody at that spot or bringing in a free agent at that spot.
Yeah, so obviously the big one is Bradley Bozeman. We know the offensive line is going to be a huge part of this offseason, whether it's through free agency or through the draft. We know that this is where DaCosta wants to hit on. We've seen him be aggressive at the wide receiver position when that group was weak. We saw him go heavy in the 2019 draft with the linebackers when he selected Patrick Queen and Malik Harrison. So we know that when there's a deficiency on this roster, that he's ultra aggressive at trying to correct those. So right now, the mystery for us as fans, the people on the outside, is what kind of contract will Bradley Bozeman command? There's his price, there's the Ravens' price, and then there's the market. So ultimately, the market is going to dictate what's going to happen with Bradley Bozeman. Ideally, it'd be great to have him on, not a top 2 center contract. It'd be great to have him on a reasonable deal. I don't know what that is. Maybe it's like 9 million, 10 million. I'm just guessing here. I'm not a cap expert by any means, but I certainly do not want to make him one of the top 3 highest paid centers in the league. That's something that I really don't want the Ravens to do. Just because I feel like that should be left for premium players. When Ronnie Stanley was signed to his deal, he was a premier player. Marlon Humphrey, when he signed his deal, he was a premier player. Whenever they get Lamar Jackson done, he's going to be a premier player. So I want those premier contracts to be for premier players. And although he's ascending and he's taking a step every single year of his career, I just don't see Bradley Bozeman being a premier player at this point.
Well, let me ask you this: if they're not able to reach a deal that works for both sides, and you've got a vacancy. Obviously, we know Patrick McCarry um, has played center. How come I don't have Tristan Cologne? Is he exclusive rights guy or something? I don't have him on this list for some reason. Maybe he's not under contract. Anyway, I was bringing him up because we know
Oh,
McCarry.
he's an exclusive rights free agent.
Okay. So more than likely, they're
Yeah.
gonna tender him and he'll be back. So you've got two guys on the roster who've played some center for you. But Chris, I feel like there's maybe a guy that you have in mind in free agency. I don't know if you've mentioned the name of a center that you like out there. I don't feel like you've really spoken a lot about it. I'm going to give you this opportunity to throw out the guy that you were thinking of.
Look, if you're gonna spend top dollar, you might as well go top of the line. Go Ryan Jensen. If you got to spend top three money, you might as well go with the top guy. And I know we all follow Brandon Thorne's work, offensive line guru, and he said it on multiple occasions where Ryan Jensen is the best center in the league. Not just that he's nasty. Obviously that's the cherry on top, but he's a people mover. He's a guy that will grade in the run game for you. He's not a guy that's just going to be passive and just kind of get the job done. He's going to move you and then he's going to put you into the ground. And that's exactly what this offensive line needs. That's what the offense needs in general. Just one of those guys. And I feel like bringing a guy like that in, not only just with his play, but also the little tidbits and things that he's learned from Tom Brady. He could put that kind of game onto Lamar Jackson and be like, look, this is how TB used to do it.
Yeah.
Like, and Lamar could get some of that knowledge, some of that Tom Brady knowledge from Ryan Jensen. That the relationship between a center and a quarterback is one of the most important ones on the football field. And for a veteran guy like that who's worked with the best that there ever was in Tom Brady, I think that would benefit Lamar so damn much.
I agree. That would be super, super beneficial to him, just like you said, because of the nature of that quarterback center relationship. And I think sometimes, we don't always think about that, about how guys who have worked with other great players when they come on your team, how they can benefit the guys on your team at those same positions, who maybe are younger guys, especially, younger, really talented guys like a Lamar Jackson. I mean, it was a different position. He didn't play offensive line, but I think about Mark Ingram and all those years being with Drew Brees. And when he came here in 2019 and 2020, look, I'm not going to sit here and say that Mark Ingram is breaking down protections the way that a center would, protection calls and stuff like that. But obviously, if you've played with Drew Brees, you've got to understand pass protection as a running back. You won't be on the field if you don't understand pass protection playing with Drew Brees. So I think that there's probably, I can't prove anything, obviously, but it's hard for me to think that there was no exchange of that kind of information in 2019 and 2020 when Mark Ingram was around. But if you get a guy like Jensen, to your point, who's been with Brady for a couple of years now, you can take that to a whole new level. So
Yeah,
it would be.
they also, a lot of people, they're like, oh, the Bucks not gonna let him go. The Bucks have some big time free agents themselves. They have Chris Godwin, who just played on the franchise tag. They have Jason Pierre-Paul and Dominic Sue. They got Rob Gronkowski, and then there's another guy on that line who doesn't get the praise that he should, Alex Kappa, who's a
Yeah.
younger guard, and he's a guy he's going to command top pay for the guard position. So they have some guys that are going to be commanding some big time money. So it's not just a given like, oh yeah, they'll bring him back. Like I'm not saying that it's for sure they'll let him walk, but it might be a difficult thing to do where they have to choose between Jensen or Kappa, and Kappa's a younger guy, so maybe they go that route.
It could be financial. It could also just be situation. We talked about it earlier. The OC there might leave. Leftwich might leave and get a job somewhere else. Tom Brady, there's been more rumors the last couple of weeks about him retiring than we've heard in 20 years. as he's been playing. And so maybe, if TB12 steps away, if your OC steps away, I mean, Arians is 70 years old. We don't know what he's going to do. Then maybe it's kind of like a mass exodus kind of thing where guys are like, hey, we got a chip together. It was great, but they're kind of breaking the band up now. So, hey, peace, throw up the deuces. And, a guy like Jensen might move on, if there's that much change on the offense. So could be financial, always financial related. I don't want to say could be. There are always financial factors at play, but you could also have a little bit of the breaking up of the band sort of effect going on, and guys just saying, well, hey, I'm gonna look for another opportunity since things aren't going to quite be the same if I stick around here. Carey, let me get your thoughts on the guys under contract on offense, guys that are going to be entering free agency, and just kind of your 20,000, 30,000 foot view on that side of the ball.
Yeah, man, I think they're in good shape. It's a lot of youth, a lot of guys that are ascending players. I think inherently they're in better shape on the offensive line. Is Ronnie going to be Ronnie is obviously the $1 million question. But I think even him at 80% is better than, some of the guys they had to roll out there this year. And just having him back, even at 80% would put a lot of other things in place. So I like where they are there. I do expect them to spend, one of those top 2-round picks on an offensive lineman to further solidify that. So I like where they are there. Obviously, at wide receiver, they're super young, super talented with guys that are, again, ascending, and then guys that have the work ethic, have some of the things in them that you want to see. So, they're in as good a shape as they've ever been at the position, I would say, at wide receiver. And then when you look at it, I'm looking at the free agents, and I'll just hit a couple positions that I think I find interesting. Look at that running back position. You obviously got Gus, and you got JK coming back off an injury. The young guys, we really just didn't see them get the chance to really prove themselves. So I'm looking at, Devontae Freeman or Latavius Murray as guys that weren't garnering a whole lot of interest before they got to the Ravens, and they came to the Ravens and played well. I don't see these guys as guys that are going to break the bank in free agency at all. I would think that, one of these guys could come back as kind of that contingency plan, as a number 3 guy that, maybe you're able to not have to push Gus and JK so much early on. So I think that's interesting. I look at a guy like David Sharp at tackle, who showed some things late in the year. I think he'd be an interesting guy that, shouldn't cost a whole lot to bring back, as a guy to kind of fortify things. Then I look at, Eric Tomlinson, a guy that, again, shouldn't be expensive. You know what he's going to bring. A guy that I think they definitely should look at bringing back. And then Josh Johnson. Mike, you pointed this out as far as when RG3 left. Having that veteran in the room and how that helps. Josh Johnson is a guy who's played in a lot of different systems, seen a lot of quarterbacks. He's hasn't played a ton, but he's taken a lot of reps and seen a lot of different things. I think that, and he's shown he can still play as well. So I think having that experience in the room would be invaluable. And, obviously he's not a guy that's going to break the bank by any means. So I would love to see him back and in that quarterback room, to be that kind of steady and influence. So just all in all, man, I really like where this offense is in a lot of different ways. And, look forward to, them bolstering that offensive line, everybody coming back healthy and kind of seeing what they can do, all put together and healthy.
Yeah, you highlighted some interesting guys there. Devontae Freeman, like you said, I think he really showed well as the season progressed. I think early part of the season, I think everybody kind of saw that Greg Roman was trying to figure out how to use those guys, because he had Freeman, he had Murray, then they brought Bell in, and I think he was just trying to figure out, what worked best and what kind of combinations. And then Freeman kind of, like Giro always says, he wants somebody to take the brass ring and run with it. And I think Freeman kind of did. So yeah, I definitely think I could see him back, on a reasonable deal. And like you said, I mean, there weren't a ton of people beating down the doors last year, and he's a year older going into this year.
Right.
Although he's got that tape that he put out there last year, so that might interest some people too. Eric Tomlinson, just one of those valuable kind of utility guys that can do a little bit of everything. I mean, I can remember having some conversations with at Yoshi 2052 on Twitter. He said he just was asking the question. He wasn't saying whether he could or he couldn't, but he said, "Hey, can Eric Tomlinson give you some percentage of what Patrick Ricard could give you at a fraction of the cost?" And I was like, in certain situations, probably.
Yeah.
I mean, you might not have him do all the things that they asked Ricard to do, but he certainly can do some of them. We've seen that. So I mean, I think that's a really good call that you made too. And of course, Josh Johnson. I mean, like you said, my man has seen a lot of quarterback rooms. He's seen a lot of quarterback rooms inside and outside of the NFL. So, he's a guy with a lot of experience under his belt. And say what you will about that second Bengals game. Yeah, it was sort of a knife to a gunfight situation because of how many people that they had out. But just in terms of how he played, just him personally in that game, off of 11 days on the team, I thought he acquitted himself really well in that game for a guy who had not been around a whole lot and had to step in a really tough situation in a game that at the time was like for the division. It didn't work out, but that was, I don't think it was because he played poorly in that game. So I like those calls, all of them, really. I can't really think of anybody in there that you mentioned that I didn't like. And the Ronnie piece is so key. I mean, he changes the whole look of the offensive line if he's what he was before he got injured. I mean, just everything is different, if he's back. It's a big if, but he has consistently said that he expects to be back. And like you mentioned early on, Chris, when he did come back at the beginning of this year and he played in the Raiders game and then he didn't play again and they didn't necessarily shut him down right away. And then they did shut him down for the whole season. There's a lot of sort of mystery around exactly what happened and what was going on with his situation, but we know he had to have an additional surgery and he's been recovering from that. So, maybe whatever happened, maybe he had some kind of setback or, a compensatory type injury or something after he came back. And hopefully that's gotten cleaned up and he'll have, more time to rehab and recover for that. So hopefully we get the Ronnie we know back because you get him back. I think Zeidler settled in as the season went on last year. I think they'll either work out a reasonable deal with Brad Bozeman or they'll bring in somebody else at center or they'll roll Patrick Bakari or Cologne out there. I think you've got some interesting competition at left guard with guys like Tyree Phillips and Ben Cleveland. I don't know if Powers will be back, but, he's still under contract, so he's still in that mix. So Jawan James, we don't know because he hasn't played in a couple of years now, but, we know he was a guy that when he did play, has some ability. So I think that they're positioned to really have a nice looking offensive line. And that doesn't even mention the draft. Chris obviously knows this because he's really been, digging in to 2022 prospects. A lot of talented offensive tackles this year. So it's a good looking group there. And, you never know. One of those guys could fall in your lap at 14, and
Stranger things have happened.
They sure have. And you just never know how far quarterbacks will get pushed up the board. And I know everybody keeps saying this is a down quarterback class this year. It's down from previous years, but that seems to go out the window when that first team is on the clock. People go quarterback crazy in this league, man. And guys get pushed up, rightly or wrongly. And that can cause, non quarterback players to get pushed down. And, a lot of times in the past for the Ravens, even when that happened, they were still picking too close to the back of the end of the first round that they weren't going to make it to them. But 14, some guys can maybe get to you at 14.
Especially if these quarterbacks have good performances next week at the Senior Bowl. Like we can see that we've seen it before. We've seen the Christian Ponders rise. So
Yep.
it's not that far fetched. You know, Daniel Jones is one of them. EJ Manuel's another one. Those are all guys who went through the Senior Bowl and they improved their draft stock tremendously. And you know, we could see that happen again this coming week with the quarterback. So every Ravens fan needs to have their finger crossed and hope these guys ball out.
I want all of them to ball out. Every last one of them. I wish all those young.
I want 6 taken in the first in the top 10.
First 6 picks. All quarterbacks.
Hey, we're 1 year removed from Rashawn Slater dropping to 13.
Yeah,
that's right. And you see how that ended. So, never say never.
I can only imagine. I don't want to put this on Chris, but I can only imagine if Ike Ekwonu is sitting there at 13 and still on the board. And who picks before them? Is it the Browns?
The Browns, yeah.
They don't need no tackle. They're straight. They're good. They got Wills. They got Conklin, right? I know Wills. I know because Wills is still under his rookie deal. I don't know where Conklin's at.
I think Conklin might have had an Achilles.
Oh shit! They might need a tackle.
I think
they might need a tackle. Well, maybe, and you can't. You would have to leapfrog them. You can't.
No, they might go wide receiver because I think Jarvis is a free agent. I think.
Yeah, and there's gonna be some guys.
Yeah.
Available. You got the Ohio State guys. I guess I don't know what the injury status is going to look like for Mechie and Jameson Williams. I don't know what those guys are going to look like. But there's going to be some talented wide receivers available if that's what you're looking for, Cleveland. And I think you should take one. I think you should 100% take a wide receiver and not take an offensive lineman, particularly an offensive. You don't need it.
No, I'll be happy with Icky or Cross, whichever one of those two. I mean, obviously Evan Neal too, but whichever one of those big three want to fall to the Ravens, I'll be happy.
Yeah, that's a good call on Slater too. I forgot, Carey. That's a good call. I forgot that he got to 13. The Ravens just haven't been picking that high, anywhere near that high, in a number of years. I guess you got to go back to Marlin's year. That was 16. And then before that was probably Ronnie, but Ronnie was like top 10. So you got to go way back. So that part's exciting too. There's another level of excitement. The Ravens, having a pick, that early part of the first round. Well, mid first round where they really haven't been picking in a while.
And we have a level of excellence that we have to uphold when we get to that time where we have our bracket and we get to our pick, because we're trying to go for 3 years in a row.
Yep.
We get the pick right.
Yeah,
I think it's a 3-peat.
So
we don't want
have a certain standard.
We want 3. We do. I mean, that's a title that nobody else can say they have. I mean, that's just facts. That's not being braggadocious. I mean, this is factual information. Check the tape. We have correctly selected the Ravens first round pick in the last 2 years. So yeah, we're looking to make it 3 years in a row. And we have fun. We have a good time with it. We put our little NCAA tourney style bracket together, and I like how we've expanded it to include other people to come in and give their perspectives. And look, other people out there in the community like it too. Apparently, some of them like it a whole lot, like really like the whole idea. So hey, appreciate that. We appreciate that, right? The sincerest form of flattery. That's what they say. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And who knows? Maybe when did we do the mock draft? Remember we did that one year? We did. We did it.
We did it. Yeah. We gotta pull that back out.
Where we picked, fun. We picked Geno Stone too.
We did. There was somebody else too. Was it just Queen and Stone?
I think Nigel Warrior.
I feel like there was somebody. Oh, Duvernay. One of y'all picked Duvernay.
Yeah, Duvernay
That's right.
too.
Yeah. That's right. We did pick Duvernay.
Yeah, so Carey DeCosta, man, and Chris Ortiz, they hit on several of those picks, so that was fun too. That was a fun little exercise, especially when we had like the clock on us and we had to think about making a pick or making a trade. I had no idea. You watch it on TV and it looks slow. You know, when you're seeing the countdown, you're like, oh, yeah, plenty of time, man. When you got to make a decision, that thing is going fast, man.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe we'll break that back out. So you guys just got a little preview of some of the off-season content that you can look forward to, stuff that we've done in the past that we've had fun with, and that we're proud of, and I think it should be exciting, and I look forward to doing some of it this year too. And I got a couple other ideas too. I'm kicking around. I got to keep them between Chris and Carey. I gotta be more careful about the stuff that I share. Like I said, you know, a lot of people like what we do, whether they acknowledge that or not. I will share those ideas offline, but I think I got another one that could be pretty cool. And we'll see if we can't put something together on that. But anything else you guys got before we go ahead and close out the show? I think we're good.
Nah, man, I think we hit everything we wanted to hit. Just you guys be on the lookout. Like I said, some of the stuff we just talked about, other things coming down the pike. We got a lot to bring this off season.
Yeah, anything for you, Chris? You good?
Yeah, like Carey said, man, just look out for the stuff that we'll be bringing. I know we've been talking about doing all of these draft shows that we'd like to do over the years, and I'm excited to do it because when we get into it, it's a fun conversation. It's not that, oh man, you dumb, you don't know what you're talking about. Like, no, I don't want this kind of player. Like, I don't want a linebacker. No, I don't want this tackle because his arms are short. Like, we get into it. We kind of, even though we might not agree, but we're willing to listen and we're willing to see why. Oh, why does this person like Terrace Marshall and we don't? We weren't last year. We weren't bashing Terrace Marshall. We were just like, we want to see what other people are seeing. It wasn't some crusade to
Right.
prove everybody wrong. It was like, why? Why do you see that? And why am I missing it? So I'm looking forward to those conversations and just, building and getting better with everything we do.
Yeah, I think the thing that I'm really proud of us for, and I think that we try to do. Obviously, we're respectful of each other and we're civil and all of that. That's off the rip. But I think that we try to keep an open mind and really try to consider and evaluate as many possible outcomes as we can think of. Right? There can be things that you can say I don't think are going to happen, or I don't. It doesn't seem likely, right? People, you talked about the draft. People, that's one of the big things. People say, "Oh, that guy won't be there at that pick. He's never going to be there at that pick." Do you hear that kind of stuff all the time? But I think something that we really, try to be cognizant of is, hey, just evaluate the outcome, right? Don't get focused on whether you think it's going to happen or you want it to happen. Could it happen? If it could happen, then talk about it, discuss it, and then evaluate it. And then you don't have to necessarily get locked into, oh, I think it will or I think it won't. Who knows? All we're saying is if it's a possible outcome, let's talk about it and let's discuss it. So that way, we're not caught off guard because we dismiss something because somebody said a player will never get to a spot. So let's not even talk about that. Let's not even think about that. No, I don't think that's a smart way to approach things, and we don't do
Yeah.
that. We haven't done that. And
And
I guess
and on that and on that is also not even just individual players, but positions too. Like I've seen a lot of people like, no, I don't want a nose tackle. Specifically talking about Jordan Davis, and it's like I feel like I'm not necessarily because I have tiers of the guys that I would prefer them to pick, and he's not in the top two tiers that I have. But let's just say that they do pick him. It's like, all right, I have to think about like what does he bring to the defense? Like what does he bring to the team? And it's not a far-fetched idea when you start thinking about it in that sense. You're like, all right, he can do this, he can do that, he can improve other players around you. So I feel like when you just lock in and like, no, we can't do this position at all. Like I feel like you kind of set yourself up a little bit to be closed minded to all of the possibilities that there are. And we saw it happen with JK. A lot of people were like, no, we don't need a running back. And then when it happened, everybody freaked out. But when you go back to last year, I think people will be like, yeah, that was a good pick. When you look back at it. And the same, look at Jeffrey Simmons. When Jeffrey Simmons was picked, he was coming off of a torn ACL. I'm not saying the Ravens should take Jameson Williams, but let's just say that they do take him, right?
Mm-hmm.
And let's say he, in 3 years or 4 years from now, he's one of the best wide receivers in the game. That ends up being a good pick. So it's like you shouldn't just shoot something down right away just because you're so locked in offensive tackle, or edge player. Like you got to look at the whole grand scheme of things and kind of look at the past to show you like, no, these things have worked in the past. So I just feel like people should be more open-minded. Now that may not be your preference, which is fine because a wide receiver isn't my preference, but be open to the idea of having that discussion of a wide receiver or whatever position it is.
Hey,
Yeah, that's a good point.
Y'all know y'all ain't got to talk me into no wide receivers. Okay, baby, let's go. Let's go. And for that matter, throw inside backer on that list too. You want to take a swing on one of those? Hey, I'm open, right? Because you've heard it from Ozzy. I think you continue to hear it from DeCosta. Get as many good players as you can, right? Get as many blue chip type talents or red star players, their terminology, as you can. Because when you start to get so narrowly focused on, well, we don't have a need at that position, then 2021 happens. And you got bodies dropping everywhere. And we didn't have a need at cornerback. And you lose 3/4 of your secondary. So I think that's why it's so important, that point that you made about keeping an open mind and really just evaluating players, right? And trying to identify good players. And if you have your board slotted that way and a player falls to, their grade, sort of aligns with a certain pick position, then you take that player. I mean, that's how I think good teams stay good and how they keep talented rosters. If you get into, we don't need this, we don't need that, let's not pick this guy here, let's try to wait, or let's pick a guy around early because we really need it, it looks like there's going to be a run, I think you can get yourself in some trouble living that way.
Look at Brashad Perriman.
Yeah, because if
bring that
if you take too many,
I'm sorry, Mike. I'm sorry.
That's my man. I will never.
If you take too many lesser players at a position of need, you're gonna have a need for a job. You do too many of that.
Yeah.
At the end of the day,
you're gonna have a real need. if you're gonna operate with that sort of narrow focus, right? And I think that's maybe we can do a show on that one time. I don't know. There's a real discussion in that because there's a balance between, really evaluating your roster and looking at places where you have weaknesses and trying to address those, but then also being true to your board, right? Regardless of position. I think there's a real balance to that, and it's not easy. I think it can be we can kind of oversimplify it sometimes when we think about it, but I think when you've got real players in front of you to choose from in real time, I think it can be a more difficult decision than you might think. So maybe we get into that on another show. That's actually a pretty interesting topic. But I think that's it. We'll go ahead and wrap this thing. I mean, it's been a good show as always. Anytime I get to chop it up with you guys, I know it's going to be good. So we're going to get this one out. I think we're recording Friday nights. You guys get a little weekend edition. They say we don't work on the weekends, but this weekend we do a little overtime.
Give you some listening content for the snow that's coming.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. It's supposed to get kind of bad coming up your way, right? Like New York and stuff, and Boston.
That's what they say. We'll see. We'll see.
It's doing a little something down here, but I don't think it's going to do much. We might get an inch. or something like that. But they talk about 18 to 24 up in Boston.
Look, I stopped watching the news when they had the nerve to say we're gonna get between 2 and 18 inches. I was like, man, why am I watching this? Why am I watching this? Like, don't tell me that.
I ain't never seen a range like that. I ain't never seen
2 to
between
18
2 and
inches. I'm like, come on, man.
Usually they do increments of 2, 1 to 2, 2 to 4, 2 to 18.
Yeah, I never saw that in my life. So when I wake up, I don't know. That's how I'm dealing with it.
They are here kicking it like the CDC.
Just the broadest amount of information possible. Everybody stay safe out there, man. If you are in this corridor and got snow coming your way, if you don't have to be out, don't be out on them roads, man. I mean, it can get kind of crazy out there. So everybody be safe. If you can be home, be at home. And as usual, thanks for listening. Like, subscribe, download, share, tell a friend to tell a friend. Keep this thing going, spread the word. That helps us. And I think there are other people out there who dig this kind of content who maybe don't know about us yet. If you share that word with them, not only are you helping us, but you're helping them. Somebody who's looking for this kind of content and maybe didn't even know it was out there. So appreciate everything that everybody does on that tip. Until the next time, we are out of here.
Peace.
These my dads make it hurt.